Okay, let's start a discussion about chapter. Now, it says on here 27 because that's the old book, and I just left it in just in case anyone happens to watch this and it's from the old book. Our new book, of course, has this as chapter 25. But if you're using the old book, you look at it in class or whatever, it's 27. It's World War One, and notice it was called the Great War for a long time because there was no World War Two. World War Two made it so like, oh wait, we got to rename this thing here. No one called World War One World War One at the time. That's weird. Why would they call it one? Great War the First. That implies there'll be a sequel. It implies you need to give some sort of distinguishing characteristic between the two. So let's talk about causes of the Great War. It really boils down to four main ones, and that is militarism, alliances, imperial rivalries, and nationalism. So you take those four together, and you've got the Great War. Now, it's more complicated than that, and we'll discuss it. But it's a good start to memorize those, because then at least hopefully you can use that as a springboard for further information. So, militarism, it's hard to imagine, but people actually wanted this war. There was an idea that social Darwinism was a thing, and therefore great countries had to prove they were great by smashing up little countries. And the glory of war would help everybody put all these little skirmishes behind them, move to a better place. Previous wars, they hadn't been that bad. I mean, obviously, for the people who died or got mangled in them, they were bad. But for the average person, relative to what we think of war now, they were not that bad. Again, a Crimean War, for example, more people died in the by disease than by actual warfare. So it tells you, it wasn't as bad. Whereas World War One is going to be 20 million casualties, killed or wounded, which is the biggest number up to that point in history ever. This is a chart that kind of helps show like how militaristic were these countries. Compare 1870, where Great Britain is spending 3.54 these are millions of dollars, and then compare it with 1900, where okay, the Boer War is going on, but they're up to 12.6, and then 7.2, and then 8.2 by 1914. You'll see this corresponds with percentage-wise with the Germans, who went from 128 up to 406, 406, and then 8.19. You can also see the influence of Bismarck here, relatively moderate once he'd gotten Germany unified, and then William II, where it's like, hey, let's be idiots. Same thing you could see also with France. They follow the same pattern. Russia to a lesser extent, because remember, Russia is less industrialized, and that is going to come back to sting them. Bismarck's alliance system had been very clever and very careful. It had been the idea of having France isolated and keeping Russia and Austria on different sides because they both had disputes in the Balkans, which is southeastern Europe. Well, Bismarck is fired by William II, or forced to resign, more properly. And by again, William II, Wilhelm II, same dude. I'm trying to use the same thing that McKay uses, where it's in English, but sometimes I slip and I put Wilhelm by accident. So here's your alliance system. On one side, you've got Germany, who was allied with Austria, Hungary, and Italy, and later on the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. On the other side, you've got Serbia, Russia, France, and Britain. And this is in the middle here. I put the Balkans. I didn't make this actually, so whoever made this put the Balkans. And it shows that this little country of Serbia, their invasion, when Austria-Hungary invades them, that kicks off all these alliances and causes this great war, this awful and terrible thing, but awe-inspiring, great in that fashion. So what about imperial rivalries? Well, William II was upset that Germany didn't have more foreign colonies. He said he wanted Germany to have a place in the sun. He wanted to make the ones he had more profitable and to get more. So wherever he has a chance, he's going to seize it. And you can kind of see where he's coming from. You have Germany having a relatively small amount, and I talked about that in the imperialism lecture. You have France having quite a bit more, Britain having quite a bit more. Even Italy had more than Germany, or at least a comparable amount. And Germany is like, but we are bad astronauts, and we deserve to have a lot more. We're just as big as France as far as power goes, if not more. We're definitely a more powerful army than Great Britain. We might not have the navy, but of course, William II is still going to be like, you know what we need? A bigger navy to compete with Great Britain. So he's got a complex is what he does, and he wants to be able to compete with everybody and let them know how manly he is. So in an interview with the English at this Daily Telegraph, it's an English newspaper, he's asked about his aspirations and the fact that the English really distrust him. And he responds by saying, "You English are mad, mad, mad as March hares. What has come over you that you are so completely given over to suspicions quite unworthy of a great nation? To be forever misjudged, to have my repeated offers of friendship weighed and scrutinized with jealous, mistrustful eyes, taxes my patience severely. I have said time after time that I am a friend of England, and your press bids the people of England refuse my proffered, that's like offered, hand, and insinuates that the other holds a dagger. How can I convince a nation against his will? Young Metro trusts me." Well, he didn't say the last part, but it's the basic idea. You can understand where the English might be a little insulted by this. The implication that they are maybe acting in a way that is unworthy of a great nation, that his patience is severely taxed. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean he's going to go to war with us? What's going to happen? You can see where it creates more tension than less tension. Also, Morocco has a revolt in northern Africa, and this is a French territory. The French they have this all in hand. You know, it's a revolt. It happens when you're oppressing people and holding them against their will. Well, the Kaiser sends a warship to the sea out just outside of Morocco, because Morocco, of course, is on land and, you know, ships are on the sea. France is like, what is that all about? And Britain's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Kaiser Wilhelm, what is up with you, homie? And he's like, okay, I'm backing off. But then afterwards, he says, I'm never backing down again. And of course, because he's an idiot, he has to say that kind of nonsense publicly. So everybody's like, well, what does he mean by that? He's not backing down next time? Oh, okay. Notice the date on this, 1911, just a couple of years before the Great War. This is a political cartoon showing Germany fighting against France. Germany here is shown as this Viking fella. He is a big, manly guy with a battle axe. France is fighting valiantly against him. Again, this is Marianne. No, it's not. It's Joan of Arc representing France here. I apologize. I thought it was Marianne for a second. I was not thinking because I'm tired. Speaking of the French, they were still angry about the 1871 loss of Alsace Lorraine. On top of that, in the Balkans, remember those? Some people felt that Austria was treating them unfairly. See, Austria, you might recall back in chapter 15 of the new book, they started looking as like, hey, if we're going to expand, it's going to have to be south and east, and therefore the Balkans. And Russia was all like, guys, we would also like to expand in this direction because we see ourselves as being culturally similar, Slavic people. We are Slavic and they are Slavic in the Balkans. So, and Austria's all like, whatever. Bismarck had kept those two apart. Bismarck knew that Austria and Russia were not fans of one another. But the people in the Balkans, they're starting to get independence from the Ottoman Empire, but they're looking over and they're going like, here comes Austria. They want to take us over. And in 1908, Austria annexes Bosnia, which is a little nation there kind of in the Balkans, just north of Serbia. So some people, over in Serbia are like, we need to get Austria. Enter this fool right here, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, originally, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was never going to be the next in line. The old man, I think I have him. No, I don't. The old man that had been in charge since 1848 was Franz Joseph, and his son was named Rudolph. Yes, like the reindeer. Every kid makes that joke. You're not a special snowflake for making that joke. It's a hack joke. You should feel bad for making that joke. Anyway, Rudolph is handsome. He's good looking. He's the kind of guy that women want to be with and men want to be like. And like, he's just great. Everybody loves him. Kills himself because he fell in love with a woman that was married, and he was also an alcoholic, and he can't get with his lady that he's in love with because, the whole married thing, and it was a disgrace to the family, and so he kills himself. Well, now Franz Ferdinand is going to be next in line, and he was a dude that was, I believe hold on, let me check. Yeah, I was right. It was his nephew here, and so he was the next male relative closest to Franz Joseph. Now, this guy was an odd duck. Like, he'd been through all the Princess Diary type learn how to be a king stuff, just like any member of the royal family that's, next in line would have been. But Franz Ferdinand had married a commoner, this is Sophie here, and had children with her, and that was frowned upon when you're a noble. Marrying for love to a commoner? Ew. And so this relationship was fraught with peril. Franz Ferdinand wasn't allowed to ride in the same car as Sophia. They weren't allowed to sit at the same table. So when this guy finds out, like, hey, I'm next in line to be king now. I just can't wait to be king. Yeah. So when he gets a chance, he says, you know what? I'm going to go to Bosnia, that place that we annexed in 1908. And I'm going to give a speech there. And I'm going to bring Bay, not the kids, not those bays. I mean, like bacon and eggs right here. Sophia, we can ride in the same car because it's outside of Austria proper. And we can just chill and go see, I can go make a speech. We'll have a fun old time. Problem. Back in the day, they used to announce in the newspaper where everybody was going to be at any given time. So, Franz Ferdinand's entire route was published on the front page of the newspaper. Well, there is a group called the Black Hand that wants Franz Ferdinand dead. They want to send a message to Austria that their annexation of Bosnia was not okay. So they get a Bosnian youth named Gavrilo Princip, along with a bunch of other young guys. Now, Princip had tuberculosis. They had promised money to his family. He knew he was going to die anyway. So it's basically like saying, well, I might as well do something with my life before I die. And so they recruit him. He ends up killing Franz Ferdinand and Sophia on June 28th, 1914, when they are in town for him to give his speech. Well, this causes problems because, of course, they catch him. You can see this illustration here. They didn't have a picture. They did have cameras, but they didn't have a picture because nobody was like, oh, here's Franz Ferdinand. This is the part where he dies, because they were not clairvoyant. And people are all like, oh, I'm going to get this guy. And he's all like, pow, 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 pow. And they're like, what? And they arrest him and they beat him down. And they really do a number on this fella. And he sings a little bit, but not so much, but enough to let them know Serbia had some involvement. Well, Serbia is an independent nation, and the whole country is obviously not responsible, but one of the officials in the government had given money and guns to this terrorist group called the Black Hand. One of the guns was used by Princip to shoot Franz Ferdinand. So Austria freaks out. This is regicide. They have killed a member of the royal family. You don't see this a whole bunch. Like we saw it in the last couple of chapters with Alexander II being killed by the Decembrists, but you don't see it very often that members of the royal family are killed. And they like to make examples of anybody who would break the unspoken rules of don't mess with the royals. So Princip is, jailed and, like I said, beaten. He dies in prison because he was dying already. But Austria wants revenge. Well, here's another point where William II is an idiot. He tells Austria, hey, no problem. You have a blank check from us in Germany. Then he goes on vacation. And blank check, it means unconditional support. He's not literally giving them an unconditional support blank check, just saying like, hey, write it in for whatever, bro. It's cool. We're bros, bro. So Austria's all like, Serbia, we got Germany's support. We want you to comply with our investigation. And Serbia's like, okay, we will comply with your investigation. We hold that it was just one official in the government. It's not all of us. We certainly did not want, past tense. We did not want Franz Ferdinand dead. And we will do whatever we can to help. So Serbia helps Austria with everything. Then Austria declares war on Serbia anyway. Because when it comes down to it, this was a pretext, aka an excuse, for war. Austria wanted to take over Serbia anyway. So this is a good excuse. If Austria had acted faster and not taken almost a month to, dally about and then eventually declare war, it probably would have been okay. But as it was, Austria dithered for about 30 days, and then they're like, oh yeah, also you guys did everything we wanted, but we're going to declare war on you anyway. Russia is all like, no, we did not do anything when it comes to Bosnia. We will not allow this once more time. We will stop you. We will support our Slavic sister. Austria is all like, oh, you're going to go to war? Guess what? I got allies too. So Germany comes in. And then France is all like, oh, Germany's involved? We hate Germany. We're involved too. So now the alliance system has brought in all these places. But you say, wait a second, what about Italy, who's also on the German and Austrian sides? What about Britain? Well, because they are both defensive alliances, and because France and Germany were neither one attacked, and Russia declared war on Austria, Britain and Italy both say, hey, we have defensive alliances. We just chilling. We're staying out of this for now. Italy will ultimately prove themselves to be very bad friends, and they will not only not get involved to help Germany and Austria, they will end up joining the opposite side 1 year later. So that's a problem. This is a map of kind of showing where these alliances lay. And I always ask every year, I say, hey, which side do you think had the advantage? And some people say, well, they're in the center, so these guys, Germany and Austria and Italy, they had an advantage. And I say, well, that's crazy talk, because look, this Central Powers, because that's what they end up being called, are surrounded by Russia, France, and Britain. Britain and France can attack from this side. Russia can attack from this side. All of a sudden, Germany and Austria are battling from two different directions. The Ottoman Empire is going to also spring into this war because reasons? Because they're a sad nation. They are known as the sick man of Europe at this point in history. They are an empire in massive decline, and they figure, well, perhaps we can have a gain at Russia's loss. It will not work for them. They will lose, and the Ottoman Empire will no longer exist after World War I. Neither will Austria-Hungary. They will also not exist. Only Germany will exist, and they will be a shadow of their former selves out of the countries that actually get involved in the Central Powers. Note that Italy does not get involved. And Germany will be neutered so much that they will turn to an extremist who also was a soldier in World War I named Adolf Hitler, might have heard of him, and they will try to get revenge on these countries that have wronged them, and that will be World War II. A famous picture here, this is called The Crime of the Ages. Who did it? And in this, you have England, Russia, Germany, Austria, Serbia, Italy's over here, this is France, and that is Belgium, and they're all pointing to each other. And the crime is the death of the peace of Europe, which, pro tip about, I've never actually organized a funeral myself, but I'm assuming if I did, I would not leave the knife in the person whose funeral or wake or whatever it is. That seems tacky. Anyway, they're all pointing to each other and blaming each other. Like Austria is saying, hey, it's Serbia's fault. Serbia's saying, no, it's Austria's fault. Italy's like, I'm staying out of it, bros. England is like, nope, it's Germany's fault for reasons we'll get into in a minute. Belgium is blaming Germany for reasons we'll get into in a minute. Russia is blaming Austria. France is blaming Germany. Everybody's blaming each other. And up here, here's God being all like, yo, it's all your faults. Bang. So the Germans got a sweet, sweet plan. They are going to fight France first. And their plan is to go through neutral Belgium, knock out Paris, and then, because they assume that Russia is too big and not industrialized enough, that they'll take a long time to get ready, then after they've defeated France, which should only take like 6 weeks, then they're going to rush back and fight Russia using the rail system within Germany, and it will all be good. That is called the Schlieffen Plan, the von Schlieffen Plan, said correctly, von Schlieffen Plan, and it does not work. But here's the plan. In the west, go through Belgium, because the assumption here is that France, in order to reclaim Alsace and Lorraine, is going to attack to their east. There will be an army in Alsace, actually in Lorraine, no, Alsace, I'm right, Alsace, who is going to stay there, meet the French army, and then retreat. And the idea is, France will then go in, and the Germans will retreat. Meanwhile, the German army's coming around through here. What? And the French will all be out of position. There'll be less that they have to get through. Boom, they'll take Paris. Woo! Paris is done. And that's what you do to knock somebody out of a war usually, is you take over their capital. So they'll be out, and then the Germans will go right back over to fight Russia. Well, in real life, it doesn't work like that. Oh, footnote. Why didn't they go south? Why didn't they go through Switzerland? Well, you might know that there is this landform called the Alps there, so that doesn't work. Another reason it doesn't work, they got this army that's supposed to retreat, right? Well, the commander of the Southern Army says, Germans don't retreat. So he stays in position way over here. So then when the French realize that the Germans are coming in from the north, they just leave a little bit here, and then the rest of them go up to meet the Germans, and they create a barrier, and the Germans never reach Paris. Ever. There is a story that the Germans are especially cruel to the Belgians. And there's some truth. Anytime you have an army traveling through a nation, you're going to have some bad things happen. Especially when the army, as in the case of the German army with the Schlieffen Plan, had every intention of going through Belgium and pillaging their way through to get food, because they realized they were going far away from home, so they needed to get food along the way. So they're going to stop and get it along the way in Belgium with farms and cities and stuff like that. Well, this is a British propaganda poster, very effective. Shows a German, again, you can tell he's a German because you got this sweet hat, leading away a presumably Belgian woman as her city burns in the background, and we know this looks nefarious. If you are a red-blooded British man, you look at this and you say, those filthy Germans, they are taking advantage of women, they are burning the Belgian cities. Belgium is an ally. We must stop them. French do a similar thing. Women and children huddled in the shadows as those filthy Germans come along, and they're all like, "Urgh." So, look, I'm not anti-German, not in this war, but they certainly did a great job portraying the Germans as being heartless, brutish animals, and it really works with recruiting. So Britain gets involved in the war. Trenches end up set across all of the Western Front. And this is a new thing. See, in the past, usually it hadn't been equal. But industrialization makes everybody pretty even keel, except Italy, Austria, and Russia. Because these big guns of industrialization, the British, the French, and the Germans, all have similar tech. So they have machine guns, they have aircraft now, and they use that aircraft for spying and later some bombing and later dogfighting against other planes. Later on, they're going to invent tanks. But pretty much everybody's doing this around the same time. There's no imbalance that people can take advantage of. So it's a stalemate. No one's winning. Now you might be like, well, what's a trench? A trench is where you dig it in, like this would be a trench here. Here you got a wounded fella, but the rest are there. And this one would be obviously a rather shallow one. There's deeper ones further out. But you could see here, assuming that is a thing you can use. This guy, it would not be seen. On the other side, he would, but they have advantage because they're up on a hill and they're looking down. So anybody attacking them would have to come up, and these look at all these machine gun nests. This is brutal. Oh, we're going to fire stuff at them. They go down in the trenches, and the trenches are connected to further trenches further back, and they just retreat, get down, hide, and then when the artillery stops, come back and maintain their positions to defend. This is an actual battle shot of what looks like, I'm guessing, United States or British troops going over the top, that's what they called it, over the top of a trench, into the battle, into the fray. And of course, this is extremely dangerous because the other side has machine guns too. It's really awful, the fighting in this war, because you have young men fighting for what is pretty much a stupid reason. I mean, some guy got killed, and Austria took too long to blame Serbia, and now it escalated. And this whole thing is ridiculous. And these guys are getting slaughtered just like nothing by technology. And technology is no longer this great, progressive, wonderful thing that's going to make our lives better. Now it's like, oh my God, what has technology done? What has industrialization done to our world? It's really awful. Changes the entire modern conception of what progress means. This is a picture of trench life. You can have here, this would be two dudes chilling in trenches. Actually, three. Didn't see you for a second, buddy. For fun, maybe you catch rats. Rats are attracted by filth, moisture, and corpses. Guess what there was a whole bunch of in the war? And a problem with keeping your feet in these trenches that were filling up with water. If you leave your feet moist for too long, you get what's called trench foot, wherein, here's a description of it, feet swell 2 to 3 times normal size and then go completely dead. You can stick a bayonet into them and not feel a thing. If you are lucky enough to not lose your feet and the swelling starts to go down, it is then when the most terrible agony begins. Ugh, not fun. Here's another image of a trench. Again, this guy is totally safe in his trench, but look at the surrounding land. This was called no man's land. Presumably there was, I guess, maybe the Germans over here and probably over there. And in between, you had just this destroyed forest. It was awful. Most of the fighting on the Western Front is in France. It's not in Germany. So France really takes a heavy toll at the end of this war, and they're going to want revenge for it. Here is an image of a trench system. Here in the front, obviously it connects to ones in the back. There would be deep dugouts for people to rest. They would try to rotate people at the front because it would be very stressful, as you could imagine, with all that attacking and whatnot. It goes all the way back. Sometimes you have pillboxes here where guys are more fortified with their machine guns, communication trenches. Really far back, you have artillery that would fire. And then aircrafts would be aircraft would be patrolling the skies, being able to tell where stuff is, when attacks are starting to form, where they're planning on coming from, and then reporting back. An example of how these soldiers didn't see it as, we hate these other guys. I mean, this is not like World War II. World War II, you got Nazis and not Nazis. Nazis are bad guys. They straight up wear skulls on their outfits. the black outfits of the SS, the Order of the Death's Head, they straight up wear skulls on their lapels. They are bad guys. Meanwhile, in World War I, it's just dudes. And a good example of this is everybody thought this war would be quick, it would be over by December, and it wasn't. On Christmas Eve, the French and the Germans start singing carols to each other. And then on Christmas Day, they come out of the trenches, exchange gifts. I mean, we're talking like cigarettes and stuff soldiers have. And then they play football, soccer in the American vernacular. And they play football in no man's land. It really shows they didn't hate each other. They were just doing this because they were made to do this. Well, as you can imagine, the generals were not super chuffed about this. They were very angry. This never happened again. There was warnings that if there was any kind of fraternization, getting along with the enemy, that you could be killed immediately on treason charges or court-martialed or whatever. So it's only really the first year, but it's still something to think about that it actually did happen. And it's quite amazing. Here's a couple of images of World War I. You have people decaying in the trenches, people getting their face blown off. This fella's probably had part of his face blown off by shrapnel, which would be part of that artillery shell that got so hot that when it exploded, part of the shrapnel flew off and probably sliced off part of his face. A lot of amputees are created as a result of this war. Blindness is created due to the use of poisonous gases in World War I. So you have a lot of people who will never be the same again. And nowadays, when you think of war, and I'm recording this in 2016, I think most people think of, oh wow, post-traumatic stress disorder, and people come back injured, and there's all these awfulness. Back in the 1910s, people didn't think of war as anything other than glorious. Remember, we already talked about that. So seeing people coming back like this was a huge shock. It really readjusts their paradigm. And now everybody's like, oh man, we can't trust the government. War is not glorious. Oh my goodness.